Okay, welcome. My name's Troy Swanson. I'm the library department chair. Today we're doing a panel discussion on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and this is part of our One Book, One College program on Isaac Asimov's book, iRobot. And I'm really excited about this because it's a way for us to pull some of our technology faculty from the T building out of the depths and the caves that we lock them up and pull them here into the light, into the library. And I'm hoping to have a good conversation that sheds some reality on some of the technological advances that are happening out there. Let's just quickly do some intros, then I'll set it up and we'll dive in. So, Kevin, why don't you go ahead?
So I'm Kevin Vaccaro. I'm the cybersecurity instructor and program over in the T building.
Hi, excuse me, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, I'm Rob Schwinn. I'm a engineering technology instructor. Sorry, they changed my my title. I teach electronics. I was running the robotics club, which I'm going to try to get that going again this next year. Electronics, I did some LAN work also. I'm into artificial intelligence and AI, and hopefully you guys will come up with some good questions that may scare you.
Hi, I'm Larry Langelair. I'm professor of computer science. I don't think mine's on, is it?
Let's see. It might be down.
They shut you off, Larry.
Do you have a green light?
I do not.
Oh, that'll do.
Okay, we good now?
There you go.
Okay, again, I'm Larry Langelair. I'm professor of computer science here at Moraine Valley. I've been here for 20 years. When I got my master's degree, I actually specialized in natural language understanding out at the University of California at Davis, which is a branch of artificial intelligence.
Nice. Okay. So just a quick setup, right? Well, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there if you do a little reading about computers taking our jobs. That, like for instance, the number one job for men who do not have a high school diploma is driving a truck. It's the one job that you can get training in. You can get a job that pays you enough money to live. And as we're talking now, people are quickly working to make self-driving cars where all of those jobs could just vanish, right? So then what happens to those people? How do we put those people to work? And they're predicting across white-collar, physicians and insurance industry, all kinds of jobs, we're seeing computer programs increasingly able to do our work. And so I think that's the thing that I'd like to talk a little bit about is, what's the reality? How far will this go? Should we be really scared? What does the technology look like with technology people who actually know it? So let's dive in. First off, I want to just get some definitions and help us understand I've been using the word artificial intelligence or the term, but I think the term that is preferred is machine learning, and maybe what's the difference? Help us understand.
All right, so artificial intelligence is the umbrella, so think of it as the large covering. Machine learning is underneath that, so is deep learning. Machine learning is a branch of the whole spectrum we call artificial intelligence. It's a branch we're given, when they say machine learning, it means you give it enough data, it can analyze it and draw decisions based on a large data set, and I mean large data set.
So, yeah, going off of what Kevin was talking about, basically we have a very large data set. So it could be a data set on anything. What Troy was talking about, automatic driving trucks and driving cars, which everyone knows about the Teslas. They drive themselves and sometimes kill people also inadvertently. So it's not 100%. I know, yeah, the guy with the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some flaws to it, and unfortunately, some flaws are going to kill people. But basically, the way this stuff is trained is we'll give it a lot of different situations and tell it what to do. So it's gonna, when they're training these, they'll have other cars, they'll have stoplights, they'll have signs. And the car is supposed to pick that up and make a decision on what to do. Okay, there's a sign that says 35. Now I'm going to lower the speed down to 35. Pedestrians walking in front of me, slam on the brakes. But like I said, there's still flaws to the system, but that's why people are working on this stuff. And also what Troy was talking about, People are worried about losing jobs. Some people may lose jobs, but other jobs are going to pop up because it's technology, and it's not going to build itself, which that's what some people vision artificial intelligence, and that's a lot of what movies portrayed, where the robots are thinking for themselves. They're really not. We're telling them how to think, and then they're coming up with decisions.
I'll go ahead and pick up on a couple of things that both Kevin and Rob said. One is going back to artificial intelligence as the umbrella. Machine learning specifically, I want to talk a little bit about what it is not, even though it applies to a lot of these areas. Machine learning is not robotics. It's not automation. Natural language understanding that I mentioned. Machine learning can help in all of these areas, but it's not specifically that. It's not all about processing speech or generating speech. It's not, most importantly, I would add that machine learning is not actually learning. Okay, that is certainly the term that's used, but learning to me implies an understanding of what it is that you're seeing and recognizing, and it's more machine pattern recognition. We feed a lot of data, and there are patterns there to be discerned. What those patterns mean and how to use those is something that certainly a human has to train it on. After it's trained on that, it gets better and it gets better, and it can even self-train at points. But probably the most important thing to take away from all of these fields right now is how narrow the specialty is. You are creating a system that can do one thing really well, and a 5-year-old can probably beat it on everything else. So, as we get to some of the future questions, I'll start talking about artificial general intelligence, which is really for sure not what's happening right now. A machine that thinks and acts like a human and can exceed a human in most ways.
So just to get a little more detail, I read about a program that learned to recognize pictures of cats. So like you mentioned, like most 3 and 4-year-olds can point at a thing and say, oh, it's a cat, or not a cat, right?
Right.
How would that look to teach a machine to recognize a cat or whatever, a thing?
Yeah, so part of teaching it is showing it lots and lots of pictures of cats, but then somebody's got to be there to help it understand what it's seeing and what the characteristics are. It can notice certain patterns and recognize those, but I guess I'll change it away from the cats and start talking about Amazon. When you shop at Amazon, there's machine learning at play there when it goes down and it suggests to you and it says, hey, other people who bought this item also bought these items. Okay, that may be kind of a simplistic form of machine learning, but it's for sure the computer is looking at the patterns of what you've bought specifically, looking at, hopefully for Amazon, millions of customers and other people who bought either that specifically or other things, and is saying, hey, you may not have thought of this, but here's some other things that you might want to be thinking about buying. So certainly one of the things about the machine learning there is that Amazon doesn't have to do a whole lot of extra work of going and telling when a pattern is recognized whether it's good or not, because they've got the data already that many other people who bought the particular item you're purchasing right now also went and bought other items. Okay, so in the data they're gathering, there's already kind of proof of concept, if you want to call it that, of, hey, here's some related items. They don't have to do any extra training. That's not true in a lot of other things, coming back to the example of cats. Somebody's got to be there and tell it when it's right and when it's wrong.
So stemming off of where Larry was going, how many of you guys, I say you guys in general, use Pandora? I was going to say, for real, no one listens to Pandora? So Pandora, it's online radio type of app, but you pick a station, you say rock, and then an Aerosmith song comes on and you give it a thumbs up, and another song comes on. It won't only give you rock songs, it'll actually give you other genres of songs, but it's going to see each one that you say, yeah, I like this song. Oh, no, I don't like this song. Because you may not like songs there in the rock genre, but it's going to learn what you like and find other songs that other people like that are similar to that and give you those songs. It's going to constantly give you different things. That's all I listen to. I listen to Pandora. And, I have Red Hot Chili Peppers, and every now and then a Beatles song will come on, and I'm like, what the heck is this? I don't listen to Beatles, and thumbs down, and I won't see Beatles on there anymore. But every now and then it'll throw in something slightly different to see if you're going to like that also. And it's trying to figure out a pattern of what you're looking for. And then the songs that it's going to give you that you haven't liked already, it's going to start matching that pattern also.
Well, and I think Pandora is an interesting example, maybe a way that we could talk about what like data sets look like, because the behind Pandora, and I'm not an expert, that's for sure, is each song they've given it a range of characteristics from genres and artist names, but also like beat and rhythms. And
the type of beats,
music.
the type of drums, the type of singing, if it's a grungy singing, if it's alto. There's a lot of other aspects to each song, and it's not just tied up to one group or even one singer. A lot of singers sing a lot of different ways, and it will take those ways of that song that you liked and match up those ways that are similar to other songs with the same ways.
So if you keep giving thumbs up, it's going to correlate why, like, what are these reasons why this person keeps giving thumbs up, and he really or she really likes whatever.
It's like, it wasn't just this genre, it wasn't just this group, but he likes bands that have a lot of bass notes in it, and it will give you other bands similar to that. And sometimes it's just testing the waters and just seeing if you're going to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and then it adjusts. Each time you hit that thumbs up or thumbs down, it's going to take that into account for the next song that it randomly gives you. It's not really random, but it's basing it off of all your other likes or dislikes.
And I'll take that a little bit further and build on what Troy and Rob have both said, focusing on this thumbs up and thumbs down. Yes, that's helping tune an individual station, but it's also additional data as selections are being made for other people who are listening, who it senses have similar tastes. And it's like, okay, several people over here have thumbsed up this when they're listening to similar things to you are. Let's try that and see how you like that. So it's really now all of a sudden some judgment is being made by the people who are using it, and that's an important part. Is as you think about where machine learning is applicable, how to train that machine learning is an extremely important and sometimes expensive way of doing it. So when you have that easy capability as a part of the process, that it's distributed across everybody using it, who's providing that data to the company, now you've got some pretty powerful learning going on that it gets better and better and better over time.
One more quick analogy. So in the past, before Pandora, the way this was done was through radio stations. People would call up a radio station, and DJs would just play songs, and someone would call up and say, hey, what was that song? I really like that. And they keep track of the likes and how many people request songs, and that's the songs that they play over and over again. Their job is to keep you listening to generate revenue through commercials. So Pandora is kind of doing the same thing. It's trying to figure out what you like, so either you pay for their service, or if you're doing it the freeway, you hear the ads. But it's still keeping you hooked on it by figuring out what you like and tailoring the music stream to that.
And instead of paying a human to sit there, now we don't pay them anymore.
Right. And I mean, who listens to FM anymore?
All right. Okay, well, let's think next. So what are the kinds of things, we've touched on this, right, a little bit, but maybe we can just go a little deeper here. What are the things that machine learning is really good at?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. It was a recent one. So they do a lot of academic research in, say, material science, all right, science of materials, and many academic papers are written. And they've been trying to solve a particular problem, material science, for quite a long time, and there's many research papers, hundreds and research papers, all trying to approach the problem. So they fed all this research into a machine, and basically they had solved the problem. They just didn't see it. So what the machine did is it read all the paper, basically took in all the form, put it all together, and then drew and said, wait a minute, the formula is right here. You've had it all the time. It's just that no one could have read all that research and put it all together. It basically read it all, took all the formulas, did the crunch, and said, hey, this was the formula you've been looking for the last how many years. You all solved it. You just didn't correlate this data. So it's really, really good at that. Now, what it's not good at, I'll give you an example, just because it's going to come up, is that like self-driving cars, right? So it's very good at, okay, based on GPS, I'm going to go here and there. There's actual company that actually formed that when there's situations like, we never get snow here, right? When it's an icy, snowy condition, the artificial intelligence or the car itself can't handle very tricky situations. It can't make decisions based on road conditions and that. There's a company, actually, it's kind of like playing a video game. They have a real person that then takes over the car and drives it from miles away. I'm talking 15, 20 miles. This company actually exists. It's called Virtual Driver. So basically, they take over the car in very tricky situations where the machine can't figure it out because the roads have changed, conditions are bad. So it's not really good at when things get chaotic. It doesn't know how to deal with it like a human would. So.
Yeah, I've got an example. I'll add on to that driving example. I was fortunate enough several years ago to go out to Carnegie Mellon. There was a governmental contest going on at the time for self-driving cars, and Carnegie Mellon's entry was always one of the top ones. I got to witness their entry was called Boss, and I saw it in action there at an old retired Pittsburgh steel mill. And as they were demonstrating it, it went driving around the track, and it was doing a good job of understanding, how to stay on the road, when to stop, and things like that. And even when there were other people on the road who were not necessarily obeying the laws, like if you were at a four-way stop and Boss got there first, the other person kind of came up and then revved through the intersection. Boss understood that, hey, it's more important that I not have a crash rather than I'm right and it's my turn. But what I found especially interesting that day was as it was driving around the track, a flock of birds flew onto the street. What do you think happened? Well, actually, fortunately, it was not worst case. It did not run those birds over. It stopped. It paused for about 3 seconds, and then it honked, which I found to be especially interesting in terms of it understanding that that was the right action. So that led them to telling us a story about how the first time that happened, there may have been a first time before that that ran over the birds. Let's hope not. But it understood to stop, and then as the birds or the animals stayed there forever, it just sat there forever, and it didn't know what to do next. So it was kind of that failure as they tested and tested and tested. It's like, okay, here's a condition we hadn't thought about. We need to teach it how to do and how to deal with that.
So it's really similar to how people are taught. A lot of this stuff you really learn early in life. Look both ways before you cross the street. Before someone told you that, you just ran out, and you guys are all still here, so hopefully you're lucky. But yeah, there's a lot of situations that machine learning may try to predict, but unless it was actually taught and said, okay, this is what you do, sometimes there's I don't know if I want to say not a fail-safe mode, but maybe a fail-safe mode, where if this situation comes up, okay, what do? I don't know what to do, I do nothing. Or there may be some kind of backup. With the Tesla cars, if there's a condition where it doesn't know exactly what to do, conditions are bad, it'll beep and say, hey, you got to take control of the wheel again. I'm not going to be responsible for what happens if you don't start driving me.
Yeah, I think one other thing I would add is there was a quote that I read from Andrew Ng, who's co-founder of Google Brain in Silicon Valley. What he said about machine learning and what it's good at is he said if a typical person could do a mental task with less than 1 second of thought, we can probably automate it using AI either now or in the near future. So I agree with that quote. I think that there's a lot that we can automate. I think and specifically machine learning can take care of a lot of that. It's about the amount of data necessary to do that, and more importantly, the amount of training at what the correct course of actions are based on the data. But then what comes into play typically is how much that costs, because it's a very intensive effort to do that training and to create that system. So where does it make financial sense to do that, and where does it not? So the finances are going to have a lot to do with where it is, not so much what it's good at, but where are we even going to bother to do it.
That's interesting. So it's good at things that are predictable conditions, big data, decisions.
Exactly.
Creativity, not as good quite yet. So let's talk a little bit about where do we see it today. So as an example, I had an issue with my cable company. So I call I won't even say any company's names, but I call them, and I get a menu. I don't get a person anymore, right? It's a voice, but it says, you're calling from this number. Is this you? Yes. Are you experiencing a power outage or whatever, service outage? And I say yes. And it solved my problem, like reset my cable box. It took less than 4 minutes, and I didn't talk to a person. And it was pretty fantastic, right? It wasn't like wait on hold, and then I get someone online, and then they don't help me, and I have to go round and around. So is that machine learning at work, or is there machine learning behind that?
It is certainly basic machine learning,
Yeah,
in
okay.
part because you're punching a button to tell it your answer. So
Well,
there
I
are
would-
some
I
that
would
can
speak
there
in
are
his
some that
voice.
can recognize simple numbers and things like that. But if you want to start having a conversation with it, that would not
It's
happen.
not going to happen. Okay, right.
So what you're running into, of course, it was an automated operator. Back in the day, we're all kind of old. If you called up someone for tech support on something, a lot of times this person had no idea how whatever your problem is or the product that you had, how it worked. It was someone that had a script, and they would ask you questions. Is the power light on? Yes or no? No. Okay, check to see if it's plugged in. Is it plugged in? You know, and this is called a flow chart. It's basically questions, and then based on the answer, what path do you take on this flow chart? And like I said, back in the day, there was someone that would do this. Well, voice recognition came into play, and they just took these flow charts, added the voice recognition to it, so the voice recognition would ask you these questions and follow you through. And if it got to a point where it was like, well, I don't know, well, then you would talk to a real person. But if it wound up to boiling down to what your problem is and it can fix it itself, then it fixes itself. We save a person being on a phone. So someone lost their job as an operator reading off a script, but then someone gained a job by programming machines that do this.
I think what I see a lot of is they're applying a lot of this machine learning into large stuff like medical. So think of, you have a large amount of genetic data, a large amount of data on people. They can correlate large groups of people, and given the amount of data they have, they can then look for patterns and basically say, this, based on this, the genealogy, how it's set up, and they've used genealogy in many cases, I could draw the conclusion that there's this genetic particular trait that's going to come in this particular group in this particular area by analyzing, extreme large. I mean, they only mapped the human genome not long ago. I mean, and so they now have a way to, and that took them a while, now they have a way to take a large sum of data and kind of analyze and look for patterns and, humans' genetic makeup, what you could use with it. I mean, we've talked about facial recognition, reconstruction. They can take genetic data and reconstruct what a face would look like based on its genetic data. So it's really good at taking that stuff and really putting it together, where a human would take forever trying to do that, manually. So
I think that's one of the big things, right? So there's this, I'm going to mess it up, but there was a group of doctors like University of North Carolina, or maybe it was South Carolina, and they had a stack of heart scans, right? It's like 20,000 heart scans or some organ, maybe it's not the heart. And they could, with that, you can see if there's flaws in how it's, like you can predict the likelihood that there'd be some health issue that would come, right? And there was an amount where it would take like humans like 2 or 3 weeks to get through. And the computer, it didn't have to be better than humans. It just had to be as good as a human, but it took something like 20 minutes, right, to get through all of this stuff. So it's not that it's necessarily, in many cases, better. It's just so much faster than what we can do, right? Just raw computing power.
Right, and it's not really new technology. This has been around for a while. I mean, back in the 80s, there was stuff that would do this, but the technology has came around where this process is a lot faster. And you can give it a lot more. I mean, back in the 80s, what a big hard drive was like a 20 megabyte hard drive. I mean, that was like whoa, you got a 20 megabyte hard drive. Now that's like, thumb drives are, 500, gigs.
Right.
And the speed of processors are so fast that they could take all this data and process it now. Like I said, it's because of the technology we have now, a lot of this stuff is doable, as opposed to before, where a computer could probably do it, but it would take a really long time still. still be faster than humans.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give a few other examples. Speaking of back in the 80s, I actually worked on a project down at the University of Illinois for the Cooperative Extension Service where we created a soybean disease diagnosis program. And what the Cooperative Extension Service is it's a statewide agency that has offices in every single county in the state to provide services to consumers, but especially for agriculture purposes and to farmers. So when you think about how many soybean experts there are who can help you help a specific farmer diagnose what the heck's going on with their field of soybeans, to that farmer, that's potentially a catastrophic problem. You know, if their entire field gets killed by this disease, you know, they're out of a crop that year and they're hurting bad. So access to that expert when there are not that many experts compared to the number of farmers there are is an issue. So another thing to understand about as machine learning is applied is the ability to duplicate expertise and make it more widely available in that sort of fashion. But that's going back and talking about how in the 1980s, you know, certainly I have no idea if that system's ever been augmented to be able to just show it a video or a picture of the plant itself and be able to diagnose, because back then it was just the farmer answering some questions and self-diagnosing. But more current, how many of you, just show of hands, think that Google has machine learning behind it and is kind of smart? Okay, about half, actually seems like most of you. So what makes Google smart? Okay, so people type in a search phrase. And I will say that in the early days, Google was not nearly as smart as it is now. Because what happens is there's another example of where the person using the system is helping to train it and make it better. So you might put in a search right now and it's getting to where frequently the very first result is a good result. It was not unusual in the early days of Google. You'd have to scan down 20, 25 links before you'd find the answer you're looking for. But the thing is what Google could do and what they would data mine is they would look and see, based on that search, what was the last thing that this person clicked on. Now, it could be they just gave up, okay? But more often than not, it was probably they found their answer. So now all of a sudden we're able to judge that this answer was better than all the ones that preceded it, and that starts to apply some weight to that particular answer, to that particular search phrase. So over millions and billions of searches that have been done on Google, it doesn't necessarily understand the words that are being used and what the meaning of those is. They're just able to kind of connect. We saved, when people do searches similar to this, what results were best, and we start delivering those to you. So you can see that in essence, that's not what we think of as intelligence, but it's helpful and it's useful. I would say another example of something like that is Facebook. Okay, same thing. We're training that all the time, and you're being given stuff that's similar to, you're deciding who your friend set is, so that certainly narrows it down. But also in terms of likes, shares, things like that. That's another example of where Google is trying to decide what they show you first and highest on your list based on data it's been gathering. So another current example.
About a month ago, we had a panel discussion here in the library, which of course you could find on our YouTube channel, about bias in technology and bias that gets built in through society into these algorithms. And I thought maybe this is a good opportunity with a Google mention. I mean, Google's caught a lot of criticism. Facebook's had a whole lot of criticism about, you know, filter bubbles, where if you believe one way, you're more likely to find people that think like you. There's the famous example of Dylan Ruth, who was murdered. People who was basically a white supremacist who found information, and his biases were, there's reason to believe, were exaggerated because of Google, because he couldn't break out of his bubble and get good information. How do you, as you know, as technology on the creation side, think about the ways that we're, so this is a question that's not on our sheet, I'm kind of throwing at you here. How do we see those biases come through, and how should we think about those? Like, how can we counteract them, or how do we account for those, maybe as information users or information builders?
I would start by talking about technology in general through history can potentially be used for good or bad. So certainly when rockets were created, there's the good of being able to launch weather satellites, to be able to launch communication satellites, to be able to explore space, but we also know they can deliver atomic weapons. And same thing, it's like you look at almost all technologies, and there's that potential for good and bad. And over time, hopefully, society and laws counteract the bad and fight back against the bad applications of technology. We're going to see the same thing happening with all of this. And I mean, it's very current. Certainly, Mark Zuckerberg is being grilled right now,
Like literally right now.
Right now,
Right.
being made to answer those questions.
So one thing I'd almost like to think is that most people could tell if they're being steered away from their own thoughts, maybe by something like that, a biased ad or something that comes up and it's being now one thing about Google, and back in the day it was it was all free. You had a website, you put your website in Google, and bam, your website pops up on Google in a Google search. Then it became if you wanted it to be at the top of the listing when someone searched, you have to pay. And there's people that want to project their feelings on certain subjects, and they will pay to have you see this stuff first.
The one thing I would say to that, I give Google some credit. They're not perfect, that's for sure. But in their actual search results, they've worked to keep those fairly pure.
Yeah.
The ads on the side, I mean, they mark what are ads and what are not ads.
Right.
So if you definitely want to come up under a search term, you can absolutely pay to come up. And there's definitely people that try to game Google. I don't think Google's always innocent, that's for sure. But I give them some credit. They've tried to.
Yeah, this has been a thing that's changed over the years. Their terms of service has been updated and updated and updated, and sometimes it's very common sense. Sometimes it's just the way society is driving, and they have to change their rules and say, okay, you know what, you can't do this. YouTube is the same way. Videos that are allowed on YouTube have been changed. So YouTube, you can make money off of YouTube if you're very popular. But some of the subjects that people have been making money off of has been changing. Certain subjects. My daughter's way more into it than I am. But I guess if you're swearing on a YouTube channel, you can no longer make money off of this. Instead of saying bad words, you gotta, steer around it. And so it's changes that are being made. I don't know if I want to say to protect you, but to not make so many waves with everyone, to make everyone happier, I guess.
You just got to remember, all of this is about the person who codes it. So depending on how it's coded and how it's done, YouTube, I know this makes several times mistakes on algorithms, and suddenly they're shutting stuff off that they're not supposed to shut off because somebody said something was wrong, and the algorithm doesn't necessarily understand. It just says, oh, this is here and this looks like that, shut it off. I mean, the art of social engineering has taken a new twist with technology, because I mean, typically if anybody's ever gone to Kohls, the Kohls store, right, they social engineer people all the time. If you didn't realize it, when you buy something, they give you something in return, right? They give you a coupon, $30, whatever, because they know you're going to come back because you don't want to lose money. Right? So it's a perfect social engineering experiment, because you will come back, spend that money, and then spend more. They've just taken it to a new height with the digital world. And you got to remember, once again, it's however the logarithm is coded and what it understands. So you're just taking it to a new level. Now you're digitizing this kind of technique that we've known for years. It's now become an electronic way of doing it.
Yeah.
Just getting a tiny bit off a topic, you just reminded me of something that Kohls did a while back. If you went into Kohls and you went on their Wi-Fi and you showed the cashier that, here, look, I'm using their Wi-Fi, they give you like 10% off or something like that. And for a little while, I'm like, why would they even care? Well, they're tracking the MAC address on your phone, so they can tell when you walk into their store and even where you're at in their store by your phone. You go on their Wi-Fi, it's like, oh, okay, this person, their phone, they went on the Wi-Fi and they spent a lot of time in the men's section and, went over to shoes, and they used that for their own data and data gathering to tailor where you go more. And maybe, okay, why are these people in this section more? And, change their store around to maybe make you wander around through the store a little bit more.
And I'll add to that that may not be machine learning yet, but we talked about how machine learning requires lots of data. So someone is looking down the future and saying, hey, if we had this data, eventually we may be able to start monetizing it and build something on top of that, but the data comes first.
It is sort of frightening if they can follow you around. I think just one last comment about the bias issue, and I do want to move on. I think one of the criticisms of Google, and I think Google's is trying to address some of it, just to go back to Google, with the diversity problem. If they represent a lot of tech companies, if you have mostly white men making your technology, you're going to get technology that comes from that perspective, right? White people with education living in a certain place, you don't see certain problems in society that technology could address. And I think that's something that is why we value diversity and we try to work, but also I think that needs to spread through, as I say, with a panel of white dudes sitting up here. So I acknowledge that as well, right? So let's, so yeah, right. Let's go to, I want to ask about the future real quick. Just to project out a little bit, to go back to machine learning, what are high impact areas that we've touched some beyond driving, beyond healthcare? What are things that we see machine learning like transforming our society?
So at least in the area I deal with, cybersecurity, they're trying to teach Watson, and everybody knows who IBM Watson is.
They may not.
Okay, so IBM Watson is this large computer that if you've ever seen it, it played various games of Jeopardy and other things.
So wait, just the first computer to beat a human at Jeopardy, which they thought would never happen, right? It's amazing. Like it was on the, as a human would answer. So anyway, it was a big moment for computer scientists.
So one of the thorny problems in cybersecurity is breaches. So the amount of data that comes into a place where it's all fed in, where you're watching people trying to get in, or it could be just normal traffic, there's so much of it. You're trying to find a needle in a haystack. Which one is actually an attack and which one is not? Now, they're sitting in front of tons of monitors, they're taking in the data, they're trying to analyze it. One thing they're trying to teach Watson to do, or trying to teach some machine to learn, is the vernacular that they use in terms of, is this an attack or is it not, based on the type of traffic, what they're seeing. What they're having trouble with, and this is one of the thorny problems, is Watson doesn't understand human language. It doesn't understand the slang. So in a lot of the terminology we use in tech is slang. We know what it means. Computer doesn't know. It doesn't understand. It has no comprehension of what the slang means. So it's having trouble understanding how we're applying that to whether this is right or wrong, or whether you're actually exhibiting this. They're trying to make it so it's a lot quicker to detect what's the needle in a haystack. Is this a real advanced persistent threat, or is it just something coming, that's normal? So I see it being applied in areas like this because we're constantly seeing attacks on various companies trying to get their data, because data is worth a lot. But it has the problem is it doesn't understand the types of vernacular we use, or slang words we use, and trying to apply answers to what it's looking at.
So going off of where Kevin was going, I saw a video where they're teaching a computer to recognize people's actions. So trying to find someone that may be thinking about attacking someone. So if you ever seen someone get attacked, or sometimes a guy will walk in and he'll kind of look around, stop. Like you could tell if someone's up to no good. People could. Computers up to not super long ago, they could do facial recognition. You got facial recognition on your phone. But they can't really tell what's going on. So kind of trying to read emotions is what they're working on. And they're getting close with this. They're watching the movements of people, seeing if someone isn't really moving right. Now, in the past, security guards, bunch of monitors, if you're a security guard in the store, you're looking through monitors. Lady with a baby. Okay, a guy also as a teenager wandering around, and he's looking down the aisle, and then he's turning around, he's You know, okay, this guy is probably going to shoplift. So, you know,
Wow.
I
No
li-
threat of bias in there.
I lived in Chicago. It's always a teenage guy. I don't know.
That's how I wander through stores all the time.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and then just keep your hands in your pockets a lot.
Yep, that too.
But they are training computers to spot this, and maybe not to like, oh, hey, that's the guy right there, but maybe to alert someone, hey, you know what, in this aisle or wherever, someone's acting a little suspicious, and check it out. Let's see, the other thing I've seen is they're trying to tell if there's weapons on people. So, you know, cops could look at someone and say, oh, yeah, that guy, you know, he's got a gun on his hip, you know, underneath the jacket. Most people can't spot it. Through cameras, it's really hard to spot if you're a security guard. But they're actually training machines to look at the proportions of someone and tell if hey, wait a minute, you know, there's something going on here. You know, there's a 50% chance that this person may have a weapon underneath their jacket.
Yeah, some other ways or some other places that we're going to see machine learning have an impact in the future and probably the near future. I'll start with education. You know, talking about recognition of facial expressions and especially facial emotions. You know, if an instructor in front of a class or in a class was getting feedback on what the computer could detect as the emotional level of different students there, it can be very helpful in knowing who's frustrated and who needs kind of some help right now. Looking at the patterns of mistakes, you know, we going all the way back to the beginning when I said machine learning is really machine pattern detection. Okay, looking at patterns of mistakes that are being made helps diagnose what type of misunderstanding that student is having. That's what human teachers do, but certainly if a machine is watching everything they do, we're going to get more accurate, more rapid detection of the assistance that's needed, and better yet, machine delivered on an as-needed basis, the types of assistance that you need. Not a replacement for teachers, but a huge assist and able to enhance and hopefully increase the retention and performance of the students who are coming through that to master the materials they're trying to learn. Another place I think we're going to see a lot is more in the area, we see several already, especially from the robotics direction, but personal assistance, things like, and I think we'll see a lot of continuing revolution in the smartphone space on this. The ability to tell your phone, hey, go schedule an appointment with me, and even if the phone is talking to a person on the other end, that's very scripted sort of thing. The smartphone has access to your calendar, being able to navigate through making that appointment without you having to do it yourself. That's just one example of lots of scripted things in everyday life that machine learning can probably navigate for us.
You know, something that I just ran into yesterday, I think, Google AI. You guys want to be scared? Go on Google AI, and they have a few different tools that you could use. The facial recognition tool is strange. So I know everyone's seen facial recognition with your phone. You look at it and it pops in. This, you give it 2 pictures. So you could take a picture of yourself twice, you know, even different emotions. And so I took just a plain face picture of myself. I put it on there. Then I did a picture of myself smiling. And this scared the stuff out of me. So it told me, you're a male, you're 42 years old, I'm 42. In this picture, you're not smiling, you don't have any makeup on, no glasses. This picture, you are smiling, you have facial hair. I mean, it guessed my age. And that part freaked me out.
Did you have makeup in the second photo?
No.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's something you guys could check out. Like I said, you give it 2 pictures and it'll it gives you details that I mean, this is all machine learning that's picking up. I mean, you could tell if you're smiling or not. But guessing my age, that part really, you know, I was like, whoa, you know, because I even said, nah, it'll be close. You know, maybe within a couple of years, it guessed my exact age. The only thing I'm thinking about is I did it on my own computer, unless it looked and said, oh, Rob Schwinn, yeah, he's 42 years old. Let's mess with him.
You're on a list, Bob.
Is this one of the criticisms of current artificial intelligence or machine learning capabilities is that the actual technology itself, the algorithms that it's used, were really developed in the 1980s. And the thing that's happened since the 80s is, kind of Larry mentioned, is that the computing's gotten better. Computers have become more powerful, but that the technology itself hasn't advanced very far. And so that leads some people to criticize that there's going to be a wall that we're going to hit with this and that we're not going to go beyond. I mean, is that a fair criticism, or is that not founded?
It's, there's the famous limitation in technology that you hit on how fast a microprocessor could run, right? So we've actually surpassed that over 10, 20 times of how fast we could run a processor. They said theoretically you would hit this wall and you could never go any faster. Well, that's not true. There's been a lot of research, a lot of work. Actually, whole schools built around this particular subject, and it is advanced in a way. And they're trying to make code understand neural connections, make connections that way, things like that. It's not a one-trick pony. It's just a matter of time. Could you imagine a computer now? We've got computers that work on quantum technology. And Google's got a quantum computer that, the quantum means it's in different states at a given time. It's not just 1 or 0. It could be a multi-state. So do I think, no, this will only come as you guys, progress, as technology progresses, as other people come around with different ideas, it'll move forward. It's not going to move forward at, quantum leaps, but it will move because we've hit walls before and we've surpassed them.
So what happens when you hit a wall? You go around it.
Yeah.
So that was the thing Kevin was talking about. At one point, they said, "Okay, this is as fast as we could get these processors to go." It would come out eventually. At 3 gigahertz, it almost looks like that's about it. Okay, fine. Well, then they came up with a dual core processor and a quad core, 8 cores. So this wall has been hit. Well, we'll do something to get around it or to get over it. With machine learning, they do one-trick pony machine learnings. Okay, this program does this very well, but this program does this very well. Okay, merge the 2 programs. And now it can do both of these things very well. One big thing is, ironically, graphics processors are a big part of machine learning. So we've been doing it with regular processors for so long, and then we actually started using graphics cards for not graphics because of the way the architecture is. It's not a processor. I mean, these graphic cards have hundreds of processors built into one chip, and they can do a lot of things all at the same time. Maybe think of people counting things. Well, if you have one person counting something, okay, it's going to take them a while, but if you got 100 people counting that, they'll get it done faster. And that's what they've done. Okay, the processor can only go so fast. Well, we'll do 2 processors, 3 processors, 8 processors.
Yeah, I think the fact that the technology's been around since the 80s is, in a way, proof that we're far away from seeing the full impact. So why, if the technology's been around since the 80s, are we seeing so much progress on this? And it's not so much the technology, since it really is increases and improvements in that have been happening, but what is the bigger problem is the data, okay? In the 80s, did we have these? No, I mean, so we're all walking around with these sensor devices, if you want to call it that. Did we have the World Wide Web in the 80s? Okay, very early in the 80s. I mean, as an aside, when I was working at Northwestern University in 83 and 84, that's when I first got introduced to the World Wide Web, and at that time, believe it or not, there were less than 100 websites worldwide. Okay, so
You didn't need Google, you just needed a piece of paper.
well, actually what you got, and this is how crazy it was, is to know what all the websites were, each time a new website was created, there was an email who went out to everyone who subscribed to a specific listserv telling you, hey, here's a new website. I mean, literally, you get notified of the new websites. That's how few there were. So that has massively changed, obviously. So we're on the web. We're producing data constantly that can be used in terms of mining that data for ways to help us and to assist us. So really what it comes down to is is a combination of the amount of data, the availability of the data, and continuing improvements or not improvements, depending on how you look at it, in more and more data that's going to be available, which is also driven by devices out there to gather the data. There's ability to store and process that data, but underlying all of this are the financial implications. Yes, researchers might go look at something and look for the viability, but in terms of the commercialization of something, it needs to be financially viable. There's a lot of work that goes into creating these systems that costs a lot of money. Where does it financially make sense? And as the ability to process the data, store the data, and all that stuff gets cheaper and cheaper as it will, we'll see more and more and more areas where it's financially feasible to then go apply this technology. We're a long way away from running the table for how much this could be applied. It's just where does it financially make sense and for somebody to make money off of it.
So let's get back to the doom and gloom then. With an audience of college students who I think at least probably part of the reason they're in college, I mean, obviously you want to study art and expand your minds, but probably some of you want to find jobs after you graduate. Should we be scared? They're saying that jobs won't exist. I mean, there's really some extreme predictions that are like, most people won't be able to work and a few people will control our economy. Should we be worried about that?
So I'm going to use an old
Yes.
thing. All right. So anybody know who Alan Turing is? The famous Turing Test, right? If you ever saw Blade Runner, you've seen this. This contest has been going on for over 20 years, and no computer has ever passed the Turing Test. That you could fool that whether you're talking to a human or you're talking to a machine. There's never beaten it. I think like anything, it evolves. Like your technology evolves, your skills evolve, right? We went from floppy drives that were 5 1/4 inch that big, all right, and even before that we had the mainframe, to little tiny things. It just evolves. Your skill sets evolve, okay? People worry about, somebody's got to code this stuff, somebody's got to train this stuff, jobs just change over time. The technology moves, the skill set changes. It doesn't mean you're eliminated. You just got to evolve the job set forward. That's all it really means. The computer itself is not going to be, it's not going to be like the Jetsons, and you're going to have Rosie come around and do all your work for you. You may have a Roomba, but Rosie's not going to be there for you right now.
Yeah, so should it scare us? No. Is it scary? Yeah. Bad things, like Larry touched on it earlier, bad things can come from this. Data can be used against us. Who's seen Terminator, yeah, bad things
Yeah,
can
well,
happen
that
from
is,
it, but I'd like to think there are enough regulations out there where people shouldn't let this happen. There's so many media outlets that if something started going bad, everyone would know right away. I mean, back in the 80s, if there was a hurricane in the Bahamas, we'd never even know. It's like, now, a storm pops up and bam, it's on my phone and it's nowhere near me at all. But things evolve. People will hopefully realize something bad's
Well, let me push you a little bit. So we've listed at least 5 or 6 examples: calling my cable company, driverless cars, Amazon workers, DJs in the radio station, where those are jobs that used to exist, and those are jobs that are either don't exist or on the way to not existing. So just because I can know about a hurricane in the Bahamas doesn't mean that I have a job, right?
But now there's people that are running the computers that are running these systems. There's targeted advertising that's generating more revenue for places that sell stuff, places that need people to run them. So I don't think people are totally just flat out losing their jobs. I think it's just moving. It's almost like energy. Does energy disappear? No, it just changes.
Yeah, I think I would even like to kind of break this down into 2 parts in talking about whether machine learning should scare us. The first is, I'll go back to that Terminator notion that the machines are going to take over. That's one I don't see as realistic for any time in the near future or even the distant future. These systems that we're talking about are so narrowly focused that we really are not going to get to the point in my lifetime, in my children's lifetime, in your children's lifetime, in your grandchildren's lifetime, where we're going to see a general intelligence where machines, what they massively lack is the creativity and planning ability to go do something like that. And we're very far away from having those sorts of capabilities in our artificial intelligence, or the term that's used for that type is artificial general intelligence. So it understands a lot more than just the one little thing it was trained on. Having said that, I'll use a couple of other examples. Captain America, Winter Soldier. Okay, so at the end of that movie where you're seeing that lots and lots of targets are being targeted by the technology, certainly data mining could be used by evil people, not evil machines, to target, and the technology to take them out is there. I mean, so it's a very real concern about what evil people can do with this, just like we talked about technology has good and bad applications. So I'm not personally concerned anywhere over the next few centuries about the machines being the ones doing that to us, other than somebody else is making them do that. Now, the financial and economic part of this is very scary to me. I do feel like my children are going to be impacted by that. I think all of you are going to be impacted by that. There's various estimates. A professor from Northwestern predicts that over the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to see the bottom 50 to 90% of the economy directly and massively affected by what machine learning can do. Again, it's really good at doing scripted tasks and repetitive. It doesn't have to be repeating the same thing, but able to make decisions based on the data coming in and perform a job. Fast food, huge industry. I could see that being automated to where we have potentially nobody working in those restaurants. Right. That technology is there already. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of societal acceptance. The automated driving we're talking about, we're not very far away from the whole trucking industry being completely upended. That's a massive, as was mentioned earlier, job that people can go out with very little training and make good money at. One of the good aspects, and going back toward the response that will be given when it comes to the economy itself, is what I'm hearing is they think that the early way that this is going to happen is the trucks are going to be automated across states, but then when it gets to the local area, then you're going to see where a human driver may take over and deal with the intricacies of the final mile, they call it. Right. So I've seen, and I'll finish in terms of this with one kind of example that I've heard that I think makes a lot of sense, and that is we're in the middle of a transition right now that's similar to the one that occurred when we went from an agricultural economy to an industrial one. And directly caused or a major factor in that in the Great Depression was exactly that transition. So it's a concern, and it's something that we're going to see a lot of industries be upended. We're going to see new jobs that we don't envision right now coming out of it. So I think that there's going to be opportunities, and certainly in creative areas where machines can't do that. And I think I know I said the last thing already, but one last thing. In politics, we see a lot of conversation about a universal basic income. That's a concept that's coming along, which is if the machines are doing the bulk of the work, how are we going to pay for living? And it's basically going to boil down to a tax the machines and spread the money around so that we can, it's not the corporations who own the machines who are getting all of the profit and all the benefit, but how do we make this be something people can live in that sort of society?
So I gave Troy a video just because this is what people see as doom and gloom. So I just gave him a simple little video.
The Boston Dynamics. When you match machine learning with voice ability, right, to talk to a machine, and then you have this kind of mobility, there's a lot of potentials to replace people with all kinds of work.
Show them the video with the little drones.
Yeah. This thing could also avoid targets. So,
yeah.
You know,
see a video with the little drones that'll go on.
Yeah. So what you're seeing is this is advanced. Now this particular robot can also avoid like obstacles. So they programmed it to basically recognize there's a log in front of me. right? It doesn't really learn the terrain; it just knows it to do it. But this is the kind of thing people see and they go, "Oh my, society's going to fall to waste." Okay, but the thing has been programmed with advanced mechanics and advanced electronics to do this. It's not really learning anything; it's just doing what it's been told to do. So.
There's a famous story where robots were replacing, this might be apocryphal, but I've read this a few places. Robotics were replacing workers in a car plant, and the head of the union, the auto workers union, was walking through the plant with the owner of GM or Ford or whoever it was, and they're like, "Look, what are you going to do, union? Like, we're replacing your workers with these robots." And the union guy looked at the worker and said, "How are you going to get these robots to buy your cars?" Right? Like that becomes one of the key issues that the universal basic income, they've said, is a potential solution. So if robots take all of our work, like 80%, something like that, a ridiculous number of the U.S. economy is consumer spending. That's all of us buying clothes and phones and food and all that stuff. Like, that's us driving the economy. If all of us can't get a job, then all of that spending goes away. And so then, what do the robots make if we can't buy the stuff? And so that's a difficult economic question that I don't think anyone has the answer to right now. So just to close, we're almost there. So for all of us, all of you, like what advice would you give to students to think about the future if jobs become scarce and this becomes, or whatever, if jobs become infused with machine learning, what do we need to be thinking about? What skills should we? I mean, obviously, we all should take all of your classes is the answer, but
Go to college.
right.
Thumbs up to all
Yeah,
of you.
good step, good choice, guys.
Yeah, honestly, the low-skilled jobs that do not require education are going to be the first ones to go for sure. I think that most jobs that require a college education are going to be more insulated from that and further down the road. In terms of the question up here, which is machine learning specifically, pretty much your path is get a degree in computer science, study statistics and probability. Shameless plug, but honestly, it's the only route in. I mean, programming is how this stuff is done. So you got to learn computer science, and many of the jobs that I see out there require a master's degree or a PhD even. So it's a lot of education if you want to go into that. But you can see that that's the direction a lot of things are going. So it's not bad to consider that.
Yeah, like Larry was saying, and that's definitely a plug for you. A lot of machine learning is done on Python. And of course, to counter your plug, you could always go on YouTube. There's like a bazillion people on there, but once again, jobs don't just want to say, "Oh, okay, you could do it because you saw it on YouTube." Of course, they want to have it verified. You need certificates and degrees and everything else. But this is a very early upcoming topic. I mean, like real machine learning, I should say. It's like we've been saying for the past hour, yes, this stuff has been happening since the 80s. But current machine learning has really just been coming up and being able to be reproduced at home by people with their regular computers just over the past couple of years. Like I said, the gaming industry coming up with all these GPUs, the graphics cards, has really opened up how machine learning could be done by regular people. Like I said, 5 years ago, you couldn't do this unless you worked at some place that had a $50,000 computer. But nowadays, you can have a $1,000 gaming computer and do machine learning and set up things, facial recognition and deep fakes, and there's all kinds of a lot of different avenues for this. But it's definitely something that you could get into. Like I said, if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of channels on there that may help you steer you into which lane of this stuff that you want to get into.
I'll go on what Larry and Rob said. You have to continue to educate yourself. Go into college, continue to learn. Also expand. You can go on YouTube. You can do a lot. I have a student that's writing his own game right now, and he's put a little bit of AI in it. Just for fun, he wanted to see if he could integrate a little AI. But he's experimenting. He is taking courses to get a degree, but he wanted to experiment. So as a hobby, he's just using his own machine and doing it. You need to play with these things. You ever feel limited just because you're in one discipline that isn't necessarily technology? Playing with this stuff doesn't matter. I mean, you can buy a small computer, a Raspberry Pi, for $40. It's that big and probably more powerful than what they use to put people on the moon. But for that little machine, you can do quite a bit with it. But never stop learning, I'll tell you that, because I'm getting old and you got to continue to keep up with stuff. And if you want to get in this field, it's going to require you to just kind of participate. So
Yeah, there are also a lot of free AI libraries available that you can start playing around with. Microsoft has one for object detection with machine vision. I know that one of the courses, or a pair of courses I'd like to take as a Governor State, they've got a sequence of a robotics course followed by a self-driving vehicle course. And the self-driving vehicle uses that free library from Microsoft to detect objects in its field of vision, and I think that'd be pretty cool to take. So.
We have just a couple of minutes. Is there any questions? Can we open it up to questions from audience? One at a time, please. Go ahead. Whoever. And so the question for those in the back was, are there machine learning classes offered at Moraine?
There are not.
Yet.
Well, and I'll also say that you need, in terms of kind of a formal study, you need a good baseline of computer science before you move into those. So,
which we do offer at Moraine.
The other answer is absolutely we offer those baseline courses to move you on into that. And as you move on to your four-year institutions, almost all of those will have that. It's generally not a 100 or 200 level type of offering.
The question was, if you look up someone's name like on Google, that you can find their name and address fairly quickly. How does that work?
I will just say the same way as all of the rest of Google works. I mean, it's gotten access to that information somewhere that used to be more freely and publicly available. Phone directories. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a phone book, but the data storage of that, people got access to that. So certainly the way you would use a phone book is you would go look up the last name and zero in, and there might be several people with that last name. There might even be several with that last name and first name, but the more information you knew about them, the more it could zero in, and the computer does it the same way.
So I actually teach in this particular area an open source intelligence gathering. So one of the things is that stuff is stored in databases. That doesn't have to be there. You could actually stop your stuff from being published. That is completely possible. The problem is you use a lot of sites, you register, but they get stored in a database somewhere, and it's able to pull stuff like Pipple or who am I? There's all kinds of search engines that they use. You don't have to publish that data; it can be removed. You just have to go through a process.
And
Go ahead.
one thing that when I did my computer science degree, they talked about what was the term? Greased data, I think it was. So once you put data out there and it gets out on the web, good luck getting it back. That's why they say, be careful what you put out there. I did a lot of electronics in my day, and I would be hiring people, and the first thing I would do is I would Google their name. If their Facebook profile was open, I'd see what's on there. And I've literally had people applying for jobs, and I've found pictures of them with a big marijuana joint, and it's like, okay, scratch that guy. The data's out there. Google's very good at finding this data also. There's been sites that have had data and they've taken the data down, but Google still has it stored. So that's something that's kind of scary. You can look at cached pages, even sites that went down, but Google still stored data off of those sites.
I saw a question in the back. Eric? Yeah. Quantum computer.
Oh, the qubits.
The question is about quantum computer announced by Google.
I didn't look at the quantum. I know the Google AI is pretty new. That I just started seeing advertisements for that, And like I said, you guys can go out there and look it up. They have a few tools that you don't even have to do any programming. It's just right on the Google AI page. The quantum,
Yeah, from what I understand, it's from what I've read that they have the fastest one, but it's all proprietary to Google. It's not whatever they're writing in that. It's only to them. It's not going to be a public kind of ability. So that's as far as I know. You know.
Yeah. Throughout the history of computing, computers have gotten faster and had more storage. Quantum computing is a next step in that. We're reaching physical limitations with the way computing is done now. So a lot of what we see as machine learning now is patterns that have been recognized and detected in advance. That's exactly, Google does not go and try to do all that computing every time a new web search comes in. They've stored it. Well, the faster computers get, the more that can be done in real time. I guess an example that I did not bring up earlier of a place that we're going to see continued improvements in is weather forecasting. So it's a combination of what I talked about before in terms of having more data. It's like we had a weather sensor, complicated weather sensors every square mile on the globe. Our weather forecasting can get a lot better because it's got the data. But then the secondary problem, coming back to your quantum computer question, is, okay, how fast can we process that? I mean, if the computer takes 7 days to process tomorrow's forecast, that's not going to do us very good. That's 6 days too late. So the faster and faster the computers get, the more areas that this can be applied in a real-time fashion.
Didn't they claim that they calculated something that would take a normal computer 10,000 years?
I haven't read that to know for sure, but that's certainly the goal, is to get it faster.
Yeah.
That seems like a big deal to me.
Yeah.
That's a machine capable of doing something that the largest supercomputer on the planet can't do in any reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, it certainly revolutionizes not only how much data can be processed, which continues, we've said several times that, both machine learning and deep learning is about processing more data. The faster it is, the more processing you can do on the data and the deeper you can get with it. So it's going to open up and continue, but I just see that as a point on a continuum. It doesn't change anything other than now as it's faster. It's like research has always gone on things that currently are not feasible because the computers are not fast enough, and now we've got a computer that's fast enough to do a lot of things that really weren't feasible, and that's going to make a big leap in what can be done.
I think that's the point. I think we need to end it because we're at time. So if you have questions, you can come up and talk. And I just want to say thank you all for coming. How about a round of applause for our panel members?